Don't do the wrong thing, but definitely do the right thing. Taking it slow. First off, remember to power off your keyboard. Secondly, don't forget the sweet, kind, eager to please, and even more eager to succeed young man that brought you such amazing films as Making Your Friend's Day and Overcoming Anything That Stands in Your Way. Sacrificing and knowing what sacrifice meant and what it was worth. Remember that you forgot how much you were worth, Matthew. And it took a fuckload of laughter, sleep, and chips to get you back to a reasonable place. For the greater good, for the best possible future, Don Marquis argued that the essence of evil or harm in killing, murder, and even abortion was not the quiescence of life itself, but rather the potential future that was promised of them, like those who would pull the trigger. In essence, a future like ours. Our future. We, the trigger pullers, and the execution order maintain some composure and extensions of life after our decisions to take another's life. Know that anyone who would know the potential greater utilitarian outcome of shared equality, dignity, wealth, and compensation for our efforts here on earth do have a duty to fulfill that knowledge in good measure of their capability and capacity to do so. Unfulfilling that duty should be a crime, and by merit of the moral philosopher Don Marquis, I hope that people understand the real severity of selfishness, ignorance, and failure to act in accordance with any imagined deed, idea, or action that would bring about your and others' greatest possible future. This type of decision should be made with careful consideration for your own estate, body, mind, and any measure of emotional, psychic, or mental energy. Do the right thing. Matt. Do the right thing, Matt. They spoke to me physically at first. These beings didn't know English at first. I feel like I adopted them, but simultaneously a handbook or code of ethics I couldn't explain or read. I just knew now, based on previous experiences, the best I could do for these newly adopted, non-English speaking beings. These other beings said they were in contact with human entities responsible for my life's events and proceedings from here on out. These beings claimed insight into energies, technologies, and abilities beyond my current understanding and or ability, yet they also failed to claim that there was nothing to prevent me from these conclusions or possibilities. This was the first insane thing I accepted. Eventually, they claimed that organized crime had a great deal of reason for what had happened to me. I immediately panicked and assumed that human beings were posing as mind-reading, telepathically communicating aliens. I had previous experience with closed-eye hallucinations under no consensually taken chemicals with aliens, and man, could I read a few hundred things off those round-headed, like balloons, gray, big black-eyed beings. It was beyond understanding, but I was subjected to, more like awarded the privilege, tests, formal introductions to 4 or 5 different beings. Each different physically, but matching in some odd way to merit their job or life task. I understood this immediately, and without telepathic communication, this late into my paranormal experience, I felt like I had already been abducted, mind-wiped, formally re-explained, and forced on display to every possible living, sentient being that had ever made contact with us, or whatever beings that were ever, including the future, aware of the human race in any capacity. It's the power of video footage. It could, in theory, outlast us, our data. In my strangely first-hand experience, I've noticed the power of the audience. So much energy in the reactions and emotions of those who watch films and video projects, or music, audio, will be experienced for sometimes hundreds of years to come. The truly spectacular actors harness this and guide audiences in marvelous, sometimes even breathtaking ways. I have this strange idea that the moment of filming something, in a sense, all the combined reactions, criticisms, and potential for viewing is pitted against the frame-by-frame product. The truly raw performances. It's almost like immediate feedback. You cannot control or foresee, but it happens all the same. All this building to accept out loud the second craziest thing I thought for certain at a time. I was being watched. Just saw a brilliant bright floater. But I've seen these floaters before. They're like see-through little worms or round things. I see bright, super tiny lights sometimes too, usually prompted by my thoughts or something going on around me. I've greatly reduced the inventive, suspicious, and skeptical thoughts or reasoning, and this has also greatly reduced my sightings. I've never gotten to be in a room with someone and asked if they're seeing the same thing. It reminds me of Clanad. It's this anime where when you die, or something magical or miraculous happens, like an example of pure happiness, little orbs float up in the sky. I supposed at one point that these orbs were as close to proving that alien beings existed as I would ever get. It's beyond our ability to replicate, but in theory, any beings that live with powers and understanding beyond our own, or one that lives in a theoretical universe, could do theoretical things. Like be super tiny and a blip of life. Send signals as tiny little lights or big displays of sound or visual cue. Life inside of the lights. My mind goes on and I could make up more, as I did. It's more like reciting from memory at this point. But instead, I have to end this aside and at least write my third thing. We'll give your people so much if you go with us. Kill yourself, and we will save you. Let go of this reality somehow, and prove you no longer accept anything or persons as real, as much as they will try to convince you. Act out of the norm until we pull you out and prove to you that everything you've ever loved is dead and gone, that you're all alone. And maybe if you cooperate, then we can all help you. Your people, bring them back. Send you back with gifts. But right now, you're as fake as a ghost. You're not real. And you will never escape from the prison torture of ineptitude and powerlessness without our help. We'll make you great and fix all your problems, but you have to fight against the established powers, authorities, in false organisms that coexist in your simulated false reality. You still feel pain. You still need sleep. You are riddled with vices and temptations. Around now, I usually smile accidentally, being proud of the frailty and humanish qualities I've grown accustomed to owning. Sorry, that bracket needs explanation. So I believed a lot of this. And felt like I was being put on a pedestal, revered as a god or extremely important person. But not to my family, friends, or YouTube, video, singing, etc. Fans, I have fans, but to alien beings and deeply secret societies and groupings of entities. And I argued that I was the least of a long list of candidates that could best illustrate the human capacity for art, creativity, self-expression, and interpretable unique encapsulations of self-aware life, sentience. The third thing I believed, that I was a mortal god on a timer. Time would run out, and so would the offer to help cure cancer, infinitely produce resources, and fix any number of personal problems for the entire human population. I took my knowledge. I had to try to find ways to help create a more sustainable and secure idea of our economy, our wealth of mental health knowledge, and our ability to entertain, seemingly one of the last on a long list of things for viable, prolonged life on Earth. I felt a common thread of dissatisfaction and tendencies towards boredom and lifelong unfulfillment during this time and others, and expected had greatly to do with myself. Thought I would argue I very rarely indulge or break to waves of that type of thinking. The good news? I don't believe any of it was real. There is a chance that maybe I'm being monitored more closely. It's a legal thing the Canadian government can do these days, but affected directly or through sub-auditory hidden and visual signals? Nah, maybe someone or something picked me up when I was shaking in bed alone and afraid for my insanely hard to rationalize, interpret, or even comprehend chemically altered states of consciousness, but now I could pass a lie detector while retelling and explaining my personal account of this entire string of events that left me feeling detached, forever alone, and critically undesirable. Like, I thought that only the most virile, intelligent, genetically superior men should be allowed to breed and experience companionship. I am none of those things, LOL, and felt this kind of existential distress of needing immediate intervention and felt the desire to compensate as much as possible. Hence the screaming while driving my car around on secluded roads, singing, and perhaps even fabricating my own fantasy where the guilty parties teamed up with my friends and colleagues to make our voices heard. At first, it was to get me help, answers, and medical treatment that would have otherwise gotten me committed. So I laid low and swore to God I heard my friends' voices on the radio. Eventually, I think someone said someone had died, and there was this thing about drugs and freedom. Anyways, it wasn't real. But somebody did die. And I will eternally carry the weight of that man's memory with me. It's not fair, you know. They promised me there wasn't anything they couldn't do. And they forced me to believe them. Then somebody left the radio station to die, somewhere away from me and it. He was there from the beginning, and he spent his last months on Earth fighting and dying to cancer. All I wanted was to end human suffering, unlawful subjugation, and spread awareness of how little we truly ever learn for ourselves, and instead we trust others, and expect it all to be kind and perfect and reliable. I was forced into a world where it wasn't. Alone, expected to die, and all I wanted was to keep even if the fake, innocent people company while we all found our final steps towards the brink of life. Until death do us apart. What a joke. Love can't save you. Might can't overcome it. You will die as if never having lived, with only the living carrying the burden of your passing until finally there are no more living. I miss you, Mr. Catfish. I wanted you to see my movie really, really badly. I know you weren't the fucker who caused this or profited from it. I know now that could never be further from the truth. But I still wanted to make you raise your eyebrows and get to hear your... Wow. That was my dream that kept me pushing through all this, and you'll never know. I'll always feel responsible, and someone will and would use that against me. And I'm sorry to the family. I hope they never have to deal with my presence or this information. I feel like my family hid their knowledge of this whole situation from me, that his family blames me, and my parents know that they do. I don't know where to find comfort, or hugs, or kindness about this. I would very much like to die now. Please.